And so organic health response, what's its mandate?
I think that's, what you were saying about how we want to go beyond.
Yeah, actually, we want to connect the community with the health providers. You see, there's some gap. You find that there's a gap of follow-ups. A number of things are happening in between when somebody gets infected and they know their status. There are a number of things that are not, that need to be incorporated for us to manage HIV. It's not just a matter of knowing your status and getting medical care. You see, yeah, there is psychosocial support. There's other support. There's that family support. You find that in a family, one gets, like, the family knows that so and so is HIV positive, then people kind of stay away from this family member. You see. So we are building up this connection so that the whole family gets connected, the whole community gets connected, so that we don't see it as a curse. That is the attitude that is there. That is why there is that stigma.
How accessible is treatment?
Actually, there is an organization providing ARVs on the island. So the ARVs drugs are available.
So
I think what you're saying, though, too, is really important, that there's a lot more than just getting people access to the medication. Even though ARVs are now widely available, I think what we've really seen as our role is that the HIV/AIDS epidemic represents so much more than this virus. It has so much to do with the efficiency of healthcare systems. It has to do with the viability of farms, like the types of choices that people have to make in order to get enough food to feed their families. It has to do with the way that communities are working together or working against each other. You see a lot of competition for resources. I think HIV has a lot to do with gender dynamics. I think it has a lot to do with nutrition security. And I think that our approach has really been addressing, I think, some of the issues that in my mind are just as critical to this epidemic, but aren't specifically medically oriented. Even though myself, I'm training to be a doctor, I'm in medical school, I think that the idea of the organic health response kind of mirrors the whole philosophy of organic agriculture, which is that it's not just about what ends up on your plate. It's actually the entire environment and the whole chain from soil all the way to food. I think we kind of think about this disease in the same way. It's not just about what happens when a virus comes into your body. Like, what do you do from that point forward? It's about really looking at a community, about how are we getting our food, how are we communicating with each other, how are we educating our next generation.
So to piggyback on the education part, what do you see are some things that can happen in education?
Education as in formal education, or just education in general?
Either like adult or as also informal education with both primary and secondary.
I think education brings a lot to everyone. Like a community that is literate responds positively, or responds faster than community that is illiterate. So education plays a key role in also fighting HIV/AIDS. Like, there are facts and there are myths and there are misconceptions. You see, these are things that you find that, according to me, my findings are that people who are illiterate, they believe more on misconceptions rather than on facts.
So maybe elaborate a little bit on some of those, because I know there are very many cultural myths around HIV and AIDS, or just in general, that are barriers to information and things like that. What are some specific maybe myths that you're dealing with?
One is on condom use. It's a major. Second to that,
A little bit more on the condom?
on condom, Okay. One thing people believe that condom is a way that the government or let me say the government is trying to, like, people get infected so that the population is reduced. You see. Second, people believe that the lubricant that is used in the condom makes male to be impotent. Yeah.
Where are they getting some of these myths from?
Actually, one place that I would say is herbalists.
From
Herbalists, like traditional healers,
right.
because they also want to sell their herbs. They come up with microphones and maybe some music, and they say, if you know that you've ever used a condom in your life, please, I urge you to don't leave this place without this herb.
So,
You
so
know,
the herbalists are
yeah,
just
they're
are drumming up the business for
I
themselves.
know from that day you've been having like stomach cramps, which that's a normal thing, you know. This is the reason, because of the oils when you are doing sex, you know. So people believe in that. You see. That is why education would play a very important role, because if you are illiterate, you get to the fact.
What role do you see religion playing in it?
I think our religion is kind of more influenced with our tradition. Religion, talking about sex, it's still the same. Nobody is coming out to talk about sex. And this is where the problem is. This is where the core of the problem is.
Because I know for us too, you know, condom use and religion don't go hand in hand, right?
Yeah, that is what I was coming to.
Okay.
Our churches are not ready to talk about condom because they're not ready to talk about sex. If you talk about condom, you have to talk about the sex. You have to talk about sex. You see? And not everybody is ready to talk about this. There are some churches who just don't want to mention even the name condom itself. But people are doing sex in churches everywhere.
Because I know I've seen curriculum around, HIV and AIDS education, but they had to take out the word condom.
Yeah.
Because of these things that are happening.
I would say I think there's another really important myth though that education can help us dispel or maybe prove wrong. And I think it's oftentimes this myth though that sometimes it's just people's lifestyle choices that cause them to be infected, or it's this idea that they believe in some of these folk tales or we call them HIV myths, and that's the reason why they're getting infected. And yeah, I think it really does have an impact on the choices people make. But I also think that there's at the real root of so many infections is real economic desperation. And I think especially for women. I think one thing we've seen over and over, once the HIV cycle begins, when a breadwinner falls in a family, so many resources have to go into trying to keep that person alive while they're still sick. And once they die, that family becomes so vulnerable, and especially young girls. I think the first thing that happens is you start pulling school fees from the kids that you can't pay for. It's usually women. And when those girls stop going to school, their opportunities in life are immediately cut. Or, even worse, I think, in terms of their HIV risk, so often it's girls who are maybe in secondary school, they've got 1 or 2 more years to go. And they know that if they can just get enough money to get through the last little bit of school, then they can actually have a chance to have a career or opportunities beyond being a housewife. And I think that so often that puts women in a really compromised situation, especially on Lake Victoria, where access to income is with fishermen. And it's not necessarily prostitution, but if you can find a boyfriend, you can find a way of paying for school. And I think we can see over and over that the risk is so tied to an embodiment of some desperate choices. Not so much, I think, just because people see HIV as being a conspiracy of the government, or the condoms make one of your balls grow really big. You hear those things. But I think with with good education, we can prove that when people continue to have opportunities and access to those opportunities, they don't put themselves in those situations.
What do you see about, because you talked about teachers and students having access to the center, will they have to go through the testing as well? Or do you see that as being more proactive when you have people that, for especially younger people, to start promoting a culture of knowledge, of going and getting tested? If they start, seeing that as normalizing it, right? And as young people, who aren't, sexually active, or hopefully not, maybe not at that time, at their age, young adults and stuff,
Right.
getting tested just because, this is the right thing to do and I want to be proactive and start getting in that habit. Do you see that as something that have you started something like that, or is it?
Yeah, that it exists. It already exists. Like teachers are coming, students are coming.
How young can they be to get tested?
Actually, it's up to age 16.
16?
Yeah. Then below 16, they should get consent from the parent or from the guardian, who should come with them at the center. Yeah. Teachers, they're coming. And now that we are planning to put up the computers, every teacher has been like, when are the computers starting? And especially now that people are in holidays.
Yeah, they're ready.
They're ready.
And I think what you're saying is exactly right, though. We start by kind of making it this gate to coming into these services. But I think what it does very quickly is it normalizes this process. It's like getting your blood pressure checked. What you need to do is, and I think that's actually something that's missing with a lot of VCT centers too, that it's not regular. Someone goes to a VCT once when they're kind of worried about it, and then they forget about it. But our program really is something. Every 6 months, if you want to renew your membership, you go through this session. And I think we're in a situation where we've got 30% of our community infected. To be a positive member of this community, you need to know, I use the word positive, but maybe it's about positive living. You need to know your status to protect yourself, protect your partners. And I think that it's in some ways fostering a sense of civic responsibility to say, this is what I do to contribute. I know my own health. I know my status. And it's not because I've been sleeping around. It's not because I've been immoral. It's because I care about my community.
So what are some of the programs that you're hoping to start up or have started up at the center? Other than the counseling ones? Like
Sure.
We have the EK Youth Radio Station. Radio program, that is. We are planning to start that, and already we have a number of community group that is interested in it, and they are coming together to brainstorm what do they think, what can they contribute in terms of ideas and all that.
So it's a youth-run and content-driven radio station? Is it for youth?
Yeah, we want to make it for you.
And we've been working with some of the secondary schools on the island to set up journalism clubs. But yeah, really the idea is that instead of health messages, actually messages of any kind, we've really heard a lot of these ideas coming about sustainability and environmentalism and youth empowerment and women's rights. But instead of these ideas and messages coming from the outside, that really if we can allow youth within the community to present them themselves, design them, put the programming together, and then actually air it on the radio in Suba language, which is an endangered language. Of the 50,000 people that still speak this language, a third are infected with HIV. That broadcasting this and having the next generation broadcast this language, not only do we help preserve this language, but we can really powerfully, I think, connect right with so many people in this community who are otherwise pretty isolated.